Listos. Guten Tag, guten Morgen, ladies and gentlemen. My company was just bought by a German company, so I have to learn to toe the line. Welcome also, and thank you to Sintercafe. When we were discussing and planning this talk, we went back and forth about what we would do, and I won't give any names, but we were discussing the topic and the title, and we were having trouble coming up with the title. And finally I said, well, how about this one? Sourcing quality in markets high and low, and then question mark. And what I love about the brochure and the little tag that you get is that the question mark is still in the program. So it makes, gives it an interesting, more sophisticated twist, I think, which is, are they sourcing quality in markets high and low at Pete's? I think the answer is yes. Certainly we were here in the 60-cent market. We were purchasing coffees at $1.50 at high fixed prices. And when the market was at $3, we were also here when everything in our book looked like a Yemen Mocha or a Kenya AA+. So yes is the answer. But I think the folks at Sinter are very polite, so we came up with this polite title, but the real topic is, and the real subject on which I was asked to share some information from Pete's Coffee is really more like, why aren't you buying a fifth or a third or half of your coffee from Vietnam Robustas, and why don't you buy only Brazils? And then when we really get down to the questions that folks here in Costa Rica want to know from Pete's, are you going to stay? Will you keep buying these quality coffees? Will it change with the new ownership? And I hope to answer all of those questions. I have to start with an apology, though, because this talk, after all these amazing talks, is going to seem very specific and even like an advertisement for Pete's, which I think it violates one of the key rules of public speaking, is not to advertise only your own company and not to pander to the host either, not to talk only about Costa Rica. But there's a problem, and Pete's Coffee is the only thing I know anything about, so that's the only thing I can share with you. And I do think there are lessons, perhaps, in our experience at Pete's, and our experience with quality coffee, and our experience maintaining a high standard that will have implications for many of you and for other coffee origins as well. So here's the plan of attack. This is really just the agenda, but it's called plan of attack to make it sound a lot more interesting than it is. I'm going to give you a little brief history of Pete's. I'm going to talk about how we go to market, what we hold sacred. I will talk about the coffees we buy, including some numbers, yes. A few complaints, mine and yours, and a couple of recommendations which you should probably ignore. This is our founder. Mr. Pete was an uncompromising man in terms of quality. He had very, very specific ideas about what coffee should taste like, and he would tell you what you liked in coffee as well. A famous story in our one of the great legends in our cupping room was one day when Mr. Pete finally stood back from our head roaster and said, John, you tell me. We have some different coffees here. We have a Guatemala Antigua, and we have this Kenya AA. I'm not going to say anything. You tell me which one is better. And so John, not being used to ask his opinion by Mr. Pete, he very carefully cupped, took a lot of time, and finally he said, Mr. Pete, I think the Kenya is better. And Mr. Pete said, wrong. He said, you like the Guatemala Antigua better. This is our original store. It's still going, still a going concern. I think in this one slide actually tells you everything you need to know about Pete's. Up above, the roaster was in the back in 1966 when Mr. Pete started. And upstairs from that, in the little round window there, the turret window, that's my dentist's office. And before that, it was Jim Reynolds, who was my mentor and predecessor, his dentist's office. Jim Reynolds, of course, is also still going strong. And just to the right there, if you look down the window, there's the hair salon where I get my hair cut. And I think, if nothing else, this tells you that we lack imagination, so that we probably won't be changing anything very radically very soon, because we keep doing the same things. I hope there's some comfort in that. Pete's through the years. This is a quick timeline. Many of you know us. We've been coming to Sintercafe, of course, for all of the years of Sintercafe. And you know Pete's. We buy many, many coffees here in Costa Rica. But maybe you don't know this timeline and somewhat of the twisted, intertwined history with Starbucks. So just quickly going through it, we were founded in 1966 in that one shop. Then in 1971, Starbucks opened with coffee that Mr. Pete roasted for them and shipped to Seattle. A lot of people are aware of the early and, like I say, intertwined histories of the two companies, so I thought I would just take you quickly through that. In 1973, Jerry Baldwin, who's one of the founders of Starbucks, hired Jim Reynolds, who's my predecessor as the roast master of Pete's, as his first roaster. So Jim started out at Starbucks. And then in 1979, many people don't realize this, it was a very long time ago that Mr. Pete actually sold the business. And like Mr. Pete, he was so reluctant to give up telling people what to do and what they thought about coffee. He actually stayed on after he sold the company for 3 years to be the buyer, so that he could tell Sal Bonavita, who is the owner, exactly what to do. He couldn't give it up even after he had sold the company. And this strength of opinion carries on through what we do today. In 1984, Starbucks and Pete's are kind of the same company for a short while, because unfortunately the owner of Pete's his wife became ill, he had to sell the company, and Starbucks bought it. So this is, things are kind of happening in reverse. The guys who started Starbucks on the model of Pete's got the chance to buy Pete's, so they did. In 1987, Jerry sold the company that he founded in favor of the company that he admired. That is probably an unusual thing in the entrepreneurial world. And that's, I think, why it's confusing to relate the history. In 97, we opened a first store outside of the Bay Area. That was many, many years after our founding, so that shows you the glacial pace at which we move. In 99, we went to the grocery stores for the first time, so we have not been in grocery very long. In the first years of the company, we were relying solely on our own cafes. 2001, we became a public company. There was a public stock offering. In 2007, the Alameda, unfortunately, Mr. Pete died in 2007, and also the Alameda roasting plant opened. I mention that only for two reasons. It gives you some idea of our scale. We have only one roasting plant for the whole U.S., the whole U.S. operation, and also because it is the gold LEED certified plant. That's leadership in energy efficient design. It's the first, and I believe there's still only the gold LEED certified plant in the U.S., and we're very proud of it. And then in 2012, which I'm sure a lot of you would like to hear about, Pete's was purchased by a private company, and we've gone private. So there's no more Pete stock ticker, and you can't keep track of us anymore. We're going underground. You'll have no idea what we're doing. We were bought by Johan A. Benkieser is the name of the company. This is a press release, and if I just bring out part of it, this happened just very recently. A week ago, I was at the last board meeting of the old company, and who are these guys? I think the print is probably too fine to read from the back, but it's really only 15 guys. There's 3 partners and 15 people. That's who Benkieser is. It's not a group that's going to manage Pete's. Pete's management will stay the same. We're going to do the same things. We're going to be owned by someone different. It's not a merger situation. So people should not worry about us being merged into another larger coffee organization or changing in some fundamental way. The business that they have is they own outright Label Lux, which is a luxury goods conglomerate. They own a minority interest in one other coffee company, which is which is master blenders. And they own a lot of household products under, and also a large beauty under Coty. They own a lot of beauty products. That's who they are. Let's see. I want to give you just a quick look, just a couple of numbers of our two primary business segments. We have 200 Pete's stores. Those are company-owned stores. They're mostly on the West Coast. They are, this is 2011 data. They're 214 million in sales. The new business for us really is this grocery business, which is now national. And we have 10,000 grocery stores that we visit and sell coffee. And you can see a picture of, on the right of what a shelf layout looks like for us. That is $158 million in sales. If you look at this curve, the only thing to look at in this chart is how it's flattening out at the right. We really stopped in the last 5 or 6 years building a lot of our own stores, and that's been in favor of the grocery business. This is a little breakdown of what a Pete's store looks like. It makes about $1.1 million in a mature store. It sells a lot of whole beans. It sells $300,000 in whole beans, and it actually used to be half of what we did. And we have met the enemy, and he is us. We have cannibalized most of our own. Most of the bean business that we've lost to ourselves in the grocery channel. This is something we're doing a lot more of. Licensed channels, or licensed locations. This would be a cafe within a Safeway store or a supermarket, or an airport location. And we went from 0 6 years ago to 116 of these. This seems very small. I mean, if Dub's still here, he's probably thinking this is what we opened, you know, in one store last week, but inside one Safeway. But for us, this is a real change in the business. And this is the curve that's really been building over the last 10 years, where we've gone from $26 million to $158 million business in packaged coffee. So this is coffee that's in a bag and has to do all the work by itself. No barista, no smell of coffee, no cafe, no greeting. It has to work really hard off the shelf. This is how we are positioned in the grocery store. And producers are getting greedy here. They say, wow, $9.55 average in 2011. We can get a lot more for our coffee from Pete's. And I think, yes, you can, but we have to look at that flip side too, which is just how hard the quality must work in the grocery store, because the grocery store is Armageddon. It is a bloody price war at all times. And a grocery store will only keep you as long as you are selling a lot of product, and the moment you're not, you're gone. And so on that note, a personal note, I think for me, the persistent discounting that's going on for really quality products is not constructive. Once you teach someone that they can buy, in Michael's words, once they can buy a Cadillac for $5 or $5.99 forever, they will want to buy it for that Dodge price. That is not an invitation to collusion. That's a personal opinion. On this chart, a lot of numbers, but if you just look at the box, this explains our market share. The 9% is our overall market share. If you move to the right, we're only in about half the places that we could be, is what that 49% means. So, and if you go all the way to the right, in the places where we are, we have an 18% market share. So it's a substantial national market share of the business. So this is California, where the girls are warmer, the sun is shining, God is in her heaven, and Pete's is the #1 coffee. If you look across the top, we are #1 in California and a very strong #2 in the western U.S. This is really where we live. This also shows that even in the face of persistent discounting, that we have been successful in growing market share. This again is from 2011 Nielsen data, and it shows that we actually grew 16% while producing a higher quality coffee and while charging more for it. These are the 3 things that we hold sacred. So these are the 3 things that you can count on us continuing to do unless we can make a lot of money doing something else. No, this is what we're going to continue to do, and I'll start with artisan roasting, which is, you know, it might sound like a slogan, and the first question I think is, well, what is it? What is artisan roasting? The first thing you have to have is an artisan. So this is Paul Gallegos. He's been roasting at Pete's for 23 years. And there are only 10 people on earth who know how to roast Pete's coffee and are qualified to do it. They all have names. They're all individuals. And they all roast one person to one machine. That is one of the keys to artisan roasting. There's a person who is standing at the font of the machine, watching and creating, guiding the development of flavor in coffee. Because if any of you have ever actually tasted green coffee, which is very hard to grind, it does not resemble at all the lovely beverage that we are all here paying tribute to. Why? Why not computers? We do have computers tracking roasting and recording everything that happens with the heats and the airflows during the course of a roast. But for us, it's just another information source. It doesn't guide the roast. We don't ask the computer to guide the roast. Why? Because the computer cannot actually do the things that the human can do. A computer cannot see the way that a human sees pulling out the trier and seeing the coffee. How is it expanding? Rapidly or slowly? Is it smoothing out over the backside of it? Is oil developing and you've already got too much energy into the roast? How is the color changing? How is the color of the smoke changing that's coming out of the trier port? All of these things are qualitative judgments, by the way. Sound, as you know, in a deep roast coffee like Pete's, coffee goes exothermic twice in the roast and it emits a crack or a pop, but the quality of that sound makes an enormous difference in terms of what it will taste like. And that, of course, is the final key to an artisan process, which is that a computer cannot taste coffee. Certainly machines can detect certain levels of compounds, but they certainly can't synthesize all of that auditory and olfactory and taste information, take all of those cues from the sounds and the sight of the roast as it's developing, and map it to a taste. So what Pete's roasters do is they taste 150 roughly coffees every day, all through their shift. They roast to a taste, not to a level of darkness, not to a shrink, not to a water content, but to a taste. And they go into the cupping room, and they're constantly moving back and forth between the roasting machine and the cupping room, tasting what they've produced, adjusting, perfecting, and going back to the roasting machine to try and achieve the highest peaks of flavor, not just a certain level of consistency. It really is, in its simplest terms, it is roasting by the senses. That's what artisan roasting means. And an artisan is someone who approaches their work as a craft, not as just punching out numbers or achieving a certain amount of grunt work in a day. I'll explain our freshness philosophy and practice with our least fresh coffee. So this is a little graphic of how we deliver coffee to the grocery market. And the key to it is roasting to order or producing to order, which really just means we don't have a lot of inventory of packaged coffee. We don't have a huge warehouse with a lot of packaged coffee built up in it. We produce what's needed each day. That's easier to explain to you. That example is a lot easier to explain to you in terms of what we do in our mail order. So if you were to get out your smartphone here in this room today and order a pound of Pete's House Blend, we don't have it. And you should order House Blend, by the way, because there's usually Costa Rican coffee in it, and quite a bit of it. So if you were to order that pound of House Blend, we get that order tonight, and we will roast it tomorrow, and then depending on how you've ordered it, next day air or 2-day air, or in the case of Costa Rica, it may never get here, Depending on how you've ordered it, that's how you'll get it, and that's how old your coffee will be. So if you're in New York and you order next day air, you'll get 1 day old coffee. But that's the way that we produce for all of our segments. And in the case of the grocery delivery system, it's ordered from the shelf. So you don't order it, but a Pete's employee in 10,000 locations across the United States orders from the shelf in accordance with what the shelf needs. And only that amount, we only roast that amount, it gets shipped to them. The time frame there is not quite as good as 1 day or next day air. It's 7 to 14 days getting to shelf. And in many cases, if not most cases, Pete's coffee is sold from that grocery store before the competitor coffee arrives there. The standard shelf life, or as I sometimes like to think of it, a shelf death of a grocery store coffee is 1 year. And we are cutting that down to a couple of weeks. We allow 90 days, that's the maximum, but we never get there. And the reason is that employee is also driving that van from store to store. So if there are slow-moving coffees in one store, he will take them to the next one, check them out of one store, put them into the next, and keep revolving the stock, ordering what he needs. And in that way, we have an extremely vigorous freshness standard. So here's what you've all perhaps been waiting for. How much coffee we buy. It seems very modest in the face of Mr. Neumann's talk and global production figures that we've been discussing this morning, but it's 240,000 bags of coffee. This is again from, this is actually current. And I highlighted just a couple of countries, again, not to make an example or to pander to Costa Rica, but I think it's actually an example that does generalize to other countries. And there are no Vietnams, incidentally, actually no Robustas in any of the slices either, but there is a slice there for Brazil, which is 3% of what we buy. And if anyone is interested, exactly what we buy in Brazil is from 2 farms. One is Monte Alegre, and one is Nova Suiça, which is a Veloso farm. They're both in Minas, and they are very well-regarded estate coffees. Why do I mention it? By way of introducing to you the way that we use coffee at Pete's. So those 2 estate-designated, very high-quality Brazil naturals, we use one as a single origin special, so we sell Brazil Fazenda Monte Alegre on its own as a single origin coffee. And we use exactly that same quality of coffee in espresso blends, where we think that Brazilian naturals have a unique and very special contribution to make to an espresso blend. Costa Rica's, you might find that number a little surprising, especially if Costa Rica is producing, for its size, a large percentage. It's still only a couple of percent of the world's production. For us, it's 20% of what we purchase. So why? Because Pete's is a dark roasting company. And our signature style, although we do medium roast, is a very highly developed roast. And if you take coffee to a very high level of development with a lot of caramelization, a lot of bittersweet, kind of burnt sugar flavors with it, a lot of body, and if you don't make a significant commitment to the density and the flavor and the quality of the coffee that you use, the result will be a self-fulfilling, it will be developed in the roast sense, and you'll get a lot of roast taste, but you will not have the core of coffee flavor that stands up to it and speaks out with it, and also you will lose distinction among origins. So Guatemala will taste similar to Costa Rica, will taste similar to a Brazil, etc., if it does not have a very strong origin character to begin with. Why blend? So 80% of the coffee that we do is blends. And these are a few pictures of some famous blender farms. Some of you may recognize them. Estuardo, you probably recognize Linda Vista in the lower left. That's Patalillo or the old San Diego. Some of you recognize here, that's Candelaria, Guatemala, Antigua, San Sebastian, with the sprinklers going there. What are our rules for blending? First of all, the purpose, why we blend coffee, we have a very different philosophy about that. We feel that the only reason to blend coffee is to make something that is greater than the sum of the parts. So a coffee to be in a blend at Peet's must have a signal, individual flavor or profile or mouthfeel or something, an acidity to contribute to that blend. That can't be produced by some other origin, or maybe only by a couple of other origins. That's why we blend. We blend in order to add body from one origin to acidity from another, to the floral characteristics of another, so that you can have all of those things in a blend. One of the corollaries to that rule is that there is no coffee too good to blend. And that's why these illustrious farms here are on the blend list. This is a philosophy that goes back to Mr. Peet, and in fact, a few years ago when Esmeralda, Panama Esmeralda geisha became a phenomenon, we sent some to Mr. Peet, actually just before he passed away. And he wrote back that in typical fashion, it was pretty good. I think I could make a nice blend with this. So this was a $150 coffee, auction coffee at the time. We blend with the great coffees of Altos de San Ramon. So I've stood on this stage many times and awarded Luis for being one of the best coffees in Costa Rica. We put that coffee in a blend. Why? Because it delivers that signature, bright, clean, citric, Costa Rican character to a blend that can also contain the beautiful Guatemalan bittersweet chocolate qualities, and both of those can be in Peet's House Blend rather than just one. La Manita, we put it in a blend. It drives the producer crazy. He does not like it. He's never liked it. It goes into a blend that was created by Jim Reynolds, his reserve blend. And so too we blend with top auction lots from Kenya, Yirgachefes, grade 2 Yirgachefes, or even the rarest of rare grade 1s. All of those things are eligible for a blend. Why? Because we want those flavors there, not because of cost. And I think fundamentally our belief is that this is the specialty imperative. And what I mean by that is if you blend for cost or for cost savings or for neutrality or for fungibility of flavor, that is one flavor that can be traded to another, that is not the specialty imperative. Specialty is fundamentally about variety, about tasteable differences among coffees. And it's about having many coffees. We have 28 different coffees on our menu, sometimes more, and we don't want them to taste all the same. And one of the key ways in which we can vary those tastes is by using very distinctive coffees. So distinctiveness and separateness in coffee and flavor is one of the keys to specialty coffee. So here comes a complaint. It's offered hopefully in the most constructive way, so please bear with me. And the picture is terrible. You can't really, especially on the screen, you can't, up here on the left, you can't see it very well. It's better here on the monitor. And it's just on the right side is a Costa Rican coffee as we see it. And all I can tell you about Costa Rican coffee as it comes to our cupping room, many, many deliveries every year, is that they are consistently more faded than many other washed coffees. Well, why would I want to tell you this? Why do I want to insult my